No Heroes by Teller of Tall Tales. Maritan looked up at the faceless Duracrete statues standing like silent sentinels in front of her new school. For lack of a better word, they all wore a thick sheet of orange plastic shaped like baggy jumpsuits. There were about 20 of them, and the road to the front doors diverted around their pedestal in a roundabout. As she stared at them, Maritan felt something strange, a faint sense of something, perhaps an emotion or a memory. It was intangible, yet stronger than iron. She extended a small clawed hand and took the closest statue's open hand. The surface had worn smooth in places from years of others doing the same, but what surprised her most was the warmth, as if the stone were alive. The calluses expertly worked into the hands by the masons seemed to have worn with the Duracrete, never going smooth. For a long moment, she stood there, gazing up at the featureless, smooth face of the broad-shouldered statue. She felt safe standing near them. Rationally, she knew it was just stone, maybe warmed by the sun or an internal system. But still, she felt that if anyone were to attack the school, these statues, these men of stone, would not let it happen. The sound of the first bell jolted her out of her thoughts. Snatching up her bag, she bolted for the front doors, leaving the statues to continue their silent watch as the day passed like any other school day. That was until lunch period, when students were allowed to roam the campus and surrounding areas. Maritan had planned to eat her lunch alone on the curb and read, like she had at her old school. But the sight of an elderly human woman laying flowers at the feet of the statues caught her attention. Curiosity got the better of her, and she slowly approached, quietly watching as the old woman laid a different flower at the feet of each statue. She recognized the green stalks and fuzzy heads of dandelions and the soft, dense pink blooms of milkweed, but the white, fuzzy flowers and spider-like blooms were unfamiliar. "Do you have a question, child?" The old woman's creaky voice made Maritan jump a little, but as the woman craned her head back to look at the young Geknosian, Maritan recognized the warmth of her smile. "Why are you laying flowers at their feet? Are they heroes?" The old woman's face softened into sadness as she laid the final flower at the feet of the first statue. "They always hated that word, hero," she said quietly. "No, they were simply men. Men who made choices, both good and bad. Men who lived on the wrong side of the law, but when trouble came knocking, they showed the world their true colors." Maritan looked up at the statues again, finally taking a seat beside the woman. "Then, why do they have statues?" she asked. The woman smiled grimly, wiping her eyes on the soft black cloth of her dress. Brushing away some fallen leaves, she revealed a brass plaque mounted into the Duracrete pedestal, dedicated to the convicts of Tarvis State Penitentiary, in honor of their ultimate sacrifice. Maritan read the words with a sinking feeling in her chest. She understood what the plaque meant, but it still left her baffled. "Why? What happened?" The old woman smiled sadly at the plaque. "Almost 100 years ago, during the War of Many Names, the unified Geknosian Empire began to expand its galactic borders by force. Tarvisnia, this planet, was one of the first to fall after the United Terran Army's lines were shattered. These men, these convicts, criminals, scum, stood here, in this exact spot, and denied an entire battalion of Geknosian stormtroopers a single step past them. A single step toward the very school you learn in today. Looking at the area now, you must wonder how, but this place didn't look the same back then. It was a bustling metropolis. Buildings lined the streets so tightly that you could only see a narrow strip of sky above. The little Geknosian girl looked up at the statues again, trying to imagine the scene, but looking at the small suburban neighborhood, she found herself unable to. She could only ask, "Why?" The old woman sighed softly. "I've been asking myself that same question since I was your age. I still don't know the answer." Maritan nodded quietly, softly saying, "It feels almost like they're still here." Another slow nod from the old woman, followed by a proud smile. "That's because they never left. Their bodies were buried beneath the rubble of the buildings that once stood here, and whether by some twist of fate or some deity honoring their sacrifice, the school remained untouched. The children inside were able to evacuate when top hat agents infiltrated the planet. I remember it almost like it was yesterday. Maritan felt a pang of sadness as the old woman gazed quietly at the plaque. The lunch bell rang, and Maritan had to excuse herself, sprinting back inside so she wouldn't be late. The old woman remained for a while longer before slowly getting to her feet and toddling away. Connor O'Reilly knelt, picking up the ghostly after-image of the dandelion laid at the feet of his statue. He smiled softly before blowing the seed pods away, a gust of wind doing the same to the real flower. Sitting down, he pulled a thin, hand-rolled cigarette from the front breast pocket of his jumpsuit. Lighting it with a battery, a cut gum wrapper, and a tissue, he took a long, deep pull. Glancing over his shoulder at two of his fellow convicts playing ping-pong on the old rec room table, he offered the cigarette up. One of them wordlessly caught the ball and wandered over, taking a drag before sitting beside Connor. It didn't take long before all 20 had gathered, quietly passing the cigarette around. The soft cracking of jokes and hushed arguments were a common occurrence. Eventually, a small black doorway appeared in the street, and a young man in a tattered black robe strolled through, pushing a cart laden with liquor, tobacco, porno mags, and every narcotic under the sun. Death smiled as he handed Connor the clipboard to sign off that everything was there. Taking it, Connor signed the line and slid it back to Death. "See you in 10 years, bonehead," he joked as Death's clipboard puffed into black smoke. "Very well. I take it your chosen afterlife has been pleasant?" Death asked. Connor smiled softly and nodded, glancing at his hand. "The children laugh, play, they're happy. It's a privilege to know our efforts weren't in vain." Death nodded, glancing over at the statues. "I feel sorry for anyone who interrupts it. You guys were far less terrifying with faces." Connor laughed a deep belly laugh, glancing back at the statues as the others unloaded the cart. "I don't. We may be monsters, but at least we had a code." Nodding, Death quietly patted Connor on the shoulder. "You know, no one remembers you all like that," he said. Connor let out a sad laugh, shaking his head. "Only you know how many innocent lives we sent to you before this. We still have a lot to atone for. One good deed doesn't erase all the evil we've done. But it was a good first step." "That it was," Death quietly agreed before turning to walk back through the dark doorway. Picking up a baggie of tobacco and some rolling papers, Connor sat on the ground, watching the school's main doorway as he rolled fresh cigarettes, content to stay invisible and unacknowledged by the children inside. But if anyone tried to hurt them, well, they wouldn't live long enough to regret that decision. The end. Like and subscribe for more content.